The story everyone is telling is that AI is killing entry-level jobs. The story the data is telling is quieter, older, and a lot less convenient for the headline writers. Post-pandemic, the unemployment gap between entry-level workers and experienced workers has widened significantly. That gap is especially visible in occupations that are heavily exposed to AI, software, marketing, customer support, junior analyst roles. On the surface, that looks like a clean causal story. Large language models arrive, junior jobs disappear. But the timeline doesn't cooperate. The slowdown in entry-level hiring started before generative AI was deployed at scale inside most companies. By the time tools like Copilot and ChatGPT were doing meaningful work inside real teams, the curve was already bending. AI didn't open the wound. It walked into a room that was already bleeding. So what actually happened? The first culprit is the post-pandemic hiring freeze that never fully thawed. In 2021 and early 2022, tech companies overhired aggressively, betting that pandemic-era demand was the new baseline. When that demand normalized, the layoffs followed, and then the freezes. Senior roles got protected. Junior pipelines got quietly turned off. The second culprit is more structural and gets less attention. Companies change how they ramp new employees. The old model, hire a bunch of juniors, let them do grunt work, promote the survivors, was already creaking before AI showed up. Remote work made apprenticeship harder. Flatter org charts left fewer mid-level mentors. The economics of training someone for 18 months stopped penciling out. Then AI arrived and made the math worse. Not by replacing juniors directly, but by replacing the work juniors used to learn on. The first draft of a memo. The boilerplate code. The competitive research deck. That used to be the on-ramp. Now it's the prompt. This is the part that's getting flattened in the discourse. AI is not a one-to-one substitute for a junior employee. It's a substitute for the easiest tasks a junior employee used to do, which sounds like the same thing until you ask where the next generation of senior employees is supposed to come from. If you're a hiring manager looking at a spreadsheet this quarter, the answer is obvious. Don't hire the junior. The model is cheaper and faster. If you're a CTO looking at a 5-year horizon, the answer is terrifying. You are quietly hollowing out your own bench. And this is where the Gen Z anger actually lands, and why it's more sophisticated than the headlines give it credit for. The loudest voices online aren't screaming at the models. They're screaming at the hiring pages, the ghosted applications, the job postings that demand 3 years of experience for a role explicitly labeled entry-level. The internships that have quietly become unpaid auditions for jobs that never open. Polling and survey data, where it exists, backs this up. Younger workers are not, on the whole, more anti-AI than older workers. In several recent surveys, they're more likely to use it, more likely to pay for it, and more likely to see it as a tool. What they're angry about is the labor market that AI happens to be entering. Those are two different complaints, and conflating them is a mistake. The convenient story for executives is that AI is the reason hiring is down, because that absolves the org chart. The convenient story for AI skeptics is also that AI is the reason hiring is down, because it makes the technology the villain. Both groups are reaching for the same explanation for different reasons. Neither group has to look at the boring, structural answer. The boring structural answer is that we spent 15 years building companies that were optimized for senior individual contributors, with thinner middle layers, less internal training, and shorter tenure expectations. Then we had a pandemic, then a hiring bubble, then a correction. AI arrived in the middle of that correction and got blamed for the whole thing. Who wins in this environment? Workers who arrive already competent, bootcamp grads with ship projects, new grads with real internships, mid-career switchers with a portfolio. The bar for entry has moved up, and the people who cleared it before the gate closed are doing fine. Who loses? Anyone who is relying on a company to teach them the job. The traditional cohort of fresh graduates expecting to be trained on the employer's dime is finding that the employer no longer believes in that trade. They want you to show up trained, and they want the model to handle anything you would have learned in your first 6 months. What to watch over the next 12 to 18 months. First, whether any large employer publicly commits to expanding junior hiring specifically because of the apprenticeship gap. That would be a real signal, not a press release. Second, whether the wage premium for experienced workers keeps climbing, because if it does, companies will eventually feel the pain of not having a pipeline. Third, watch the education side. If universities, boot camps, and certificate programs start treating AI fluency as table stakes rather than a specialization, the entry-level definition itself shifts. A new grad in 2027 who can orchestrate models is not competing for the same job as a new grad in 2022 who could write a clean function. And finally, watch the politics. The narrative that AI is taking jobs is electorally potent in a way that the narrative that hiring freezes are taking jobs is not. Expect policy responses aimed at the model, not at the management consultant who recommended the freeze. Whether those policies do anything useful is a different question. The takeaway is uncomfortable for everyone involved. Gen Z is right to be angry. They are also right that AI is not the main villain. The main villain is a labor market that quietly decided, somewhere around 2022, that training the next generation was no longer its job. AI just made that decision cheaper to live with. If you're early in your career, the strategic implication is brutal but clear. Do not wait for a company to train you. Show up trained, ship public work, and treat the models as leverage rather than competition. If you're running a team, the strategic implication is the opposite. The cheapest hire today is the most expensive missing senior in 2030.